The war had been long and brutal. Humanity fought with everything it had against the endless alien swarms that came from the dark edges of the galaxy. In those days the Earth Defense Fleet was the pride of mankind. Hundreds of ships, heavy with steel and fire, sailed into the void carrying the hope of billions. They were more than soldiers. They were heroes, chosen from every nation, trained to protect the human race from extinction. The fleet moved like a single giant hand, striking the enemy wherever they appeared. People believed nothing could stop them. But then, one night, they were gone. No one understood how it happened. Reports came in that the fleet had entered a region of deep space chasing the alien armada. After that, silence. No distress calls, no signals, not even wreckage drifting through the void. It was as if the greatest fleet of humanity had vanished into nothing. On Earth, the news struck like thunder. Families waited in fear. Mothers and fathers clutched pictures of sons and daughters who never returned. Children grew up staring at empty skies, asking why their parents had not come home. Politicians promised answers. Scientists searched with powerful telescopes. Generals demanded endless scans of the star maps. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still no trace. Some whispered that the fleet had been destroyed. Others believed they had been captured by an enemy so far beyond human understanding that even their memory was stolen. Rumors spread like fire. People spoke of cursed regions of space, where time itself bent and twisted. Old myths of star demons returned to life in the minds of frightened citizens. But the truth was worse. The fleet had simply disappeared, leaving nothing behind but silence. Time passed, and hope grew weaker. 5 years later the world had changed. The war ended, not because humanity had won, but because the alien swarms stopped coming. The enemy vanished almost as suddenly as the fleet. Earth was free, but the price of freedom was strange and heavy. No one celebrated victory. Instead, people whispered about the cost. Where had the fleet gone? Why had the enemy stopped? And what did it mean for the future? In the halls of power, leaders argued endlessly. Some said the fleet had sacrificed themselves in one last great battle. Others claimed the fleet had betrayed Earth and fled into the stars. But no evidence could prove either story. The mystery became a wound that never healed. Even after 10 years, the pain remained. In the great cities of Earth, statues stood in memory of the vanished fleet. Names of thousands of crew members were carved in stone. Each year families gathered with candles, hoping for closure, but receiving none. For the younger generation, the story became a legend, a dark tale told under the stars. But in the hidden corners of government, the search never stopped. Military satellites kept listening, scanning deep space for the smallest signal. Research stations continued to explore strange energy waves beyond the solar system. And in secret rooms, some whispered of a single mission gone wrong, a mission no one dared to speak of publicly. It was on a quiet night, 15 years after the disappearance, when something strange happened. Far beyond the orbit of Pluto, an old listening station detected a signal. It was faint, broken, almost lost in the background noise of the galaxy. At first the operator thought it was nothing more than static. But when the computers processed the sound, a pattern emerged. It was not alien. It was human. The message was simple, almost childlike, repeating again and again. "We are here." The operator froze. His hands shook as he replayed the signal. The voice was human, but not fully. It carried an echo, a distortion, something that felt wrong. He reported it to his commander, who in turn sent it to higher authorities. Within hours the entire chain of command was awake. The signal spread across Earth's defense network like wildfire. Scientists studied the waveforms. Linguists analyzed the tone. Generals prepared emergency meetings. And families, once filled with grief, began to hope again. Could it be true? Could the vanished fleet have survived all these years? The signal grew stronger over the following days. More stations confirmed it. It came from a region of deep space where no ship had been for decades. The place was far, dark, and empty. Yet now it spoke with human voices. "We are here." Again and again, the message came. But what did it mean? Were the lost soldiers asking for rescue? Were they warning humanity of something greater? Or had they become something else entirely, sending a message that was never meant to be understood? On Earth, excitement mixed with fear. Governments announced nothing, but rumors leaked. The people began to whisper again. The fleet might be coming home. The heroes of old might return at last. But deep inside the minds of those who studied the signal, one question grew stronger with every passing day. If they were truly human, why did their voices sound so strange? Why did their words feel less like a call for help, and more like a warning? The signal changed everything. For 15 long years humanity had lived with loss, carrying the memory of the vanished fleet like a wound that never healed. But now there was a voice from the darkness, a voice that called itself human. At first many people did not believe it. They said it was a trick, some echo from old war machines drifting in space. But when the signal grew clearer and the message repeated again and again, hope returned. "We are here," the voice said. And then silence, waiting to be answered. Earth Command acted quickly. A team of scientists and military officers studied the coordinates. The signal came from deep beyond the outer rim, a region where no human ship had traveled since the war. It was empty on the maps, a dark sector filled with nothing but scattered rocks and drifting dust. Yet from that darkness the lost fleet was calling. The decision was made to send scouts. Small fast ships moved out, armed with sensors and long-range weapons. They traveled for weeks, crossing cold space, until they reached the sector. What they found froze their hearts. Out there, against the background of endless stars, hung the shapes of warships. Dozens of them, drifting silently, their hulls glowing faintly as if touched by strange light. The ships were not broken. They were not destroyed. They were whole, standing in perfect formation, like soldiers waiting for orders. The scouts sent back images, and soon the whole of Earth Command was watching. There was no doubt. These were the lost ships of the Great Fleet. Humanity's pride, gone for so long, had returned. The people of Earth exploded with emotion. Families wept in joy, believing their loved ones were alive. Streets filled with celebrations. Candles burned again, but this time not for mourning, but for hope. The heroes were back. But even as the news spread, doubts began to grow. Something about the ships looked wrong. The hulls seemed darker than before, metal bending in strange ways, as if grown instead of built. Some surfaces pulsed faintly, like skin under light. Antennas twitched as though they were listening. And most disturbing of all, none of the crew answered calls directly. Only the repeating message played, "We are here." Earth Command sent a flagship to meet them. As it approached, one of the returned warships moved forward slowly, breaking formation. Its engines burned with soft blue fire, different from human designs. Yet its shape was the same as the ship that had vanished years ago. When communication was opened, the crew inside finally responded. A single face appeared on the screen. It was a man, wearing the uniform of the fleet, but his helmet visor was dark, hiding his eyes. His voice was flat and hollow, like it came from a great distance. "We are home," he said. Then silence. No explanation. No emotion. Just those words. The officer of Earth Command asked many questions. What happened? Where had they been? Why had they not returned earlier? But the figure on the screen did not answer. He only repeated the phrase, "We are home." Behind him, shadows moved, like other figures standing still but watching. The flagship docked with the warship, and a boarding party entered. At first the corridors looked normal, though strangely clean, as if no time had passed. But the deeper they went, the stranger it became. The walls seemed to shimmer, the lights hummed in unfamiliar rhythms, and the air felt heavy. The crew they found were alive, but silent. Their faces were pale, their movements slow, mechanical. When spoken to, they responded with short words, almost rehearsed. Many kept their helmets on, never showing their eyes. Medical scans showed normal human life signs, but something was hidden, something the machines could not explain. The boarding party returned uneasy, reporting that the fleet was indeed alive, but not as they remembered. On Earth, families demanded to see their loved ones. The government hesitated. They feared panic if the truth was revealed. Scientists demanded study. The military wanted control. And through it all, the ships of the vanished fleet remained silent, orbiting in the dark, waiting. Days passed. Then something unexpected happened. One of the ships, without any command from Earth, powered up its systems. Engines glowed, weapons moved into ready position, and the ship turned toward Earth. Alarms rang across the defense network. Fighters scrambled, weapons locked, and leaders prepared for the worst. But the ship did not fire. Instead, it broadcast a new message. We have returned. We are changed. The words echoed across every channel. No one knew what it meant. The people who had once been heroes now spoke like strangers. Were they warning humanity? Or were they declaring something else, something far more dangerous? The celebration of their return began to fade, replaced by fear. Rumors spread quickly. Some said the fleet had been captured and rebuilt by alien hands. Others whispered that they had joined with something dark and powerful in the void. A few even believed they were no longer human at all, but something new pretending to be human. In the shadows of Earth Command, generals argued. Should they welcome the fleet home? Should they open the skies and allow them to land? Or should they prepare for war against the very heroes they once worshipped? For the first time in years, humanity stood at a crossroad. Hope and fear clashed inside every heart. And above them, in the endless dark, the vanished fleet waited silently, as if watching, as if deciding. They had returned. But something about them was different. Something about them had changed forever. The world watched in silence as the vanished fleet moved slowly toward Earth's orbit. Their ships looked like the same proud machines that had once defended humanity, yet there was something different about them, something that no one could explain. The hulls no longer shined with steel. Instead they seemed darker, almost alive, bending and twisting faintly as though the metal itself was breathing. To the people of Earth these ships were symbols of hope, the long-lost heroes finally returning. But to the men and women of Earth Command they were also a question, a mystery wrapped in danger. When the fleet finally stopped and entered stable orbit, communication was opened again. A screen filled with the face of a captain who had disappeared 15 years ago. His name was known to many, a man once celebrated for his bravery. But now he looked different. His skin was pale, stretched too tight, and his eyes were hidden behind a dark visor. His voice was slow, hollow, and heavy with echo. "We are home," he said, just as before. The officer at Earth Command spoke carefully, asking questions about the journey, about what had happened to them in the dark sector. The captain did not answer. Instead he turned his head slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. When he finally spoke again, his words were short. "We endured. We changed. We return." That was all. Then the screen went black. A great debate began. Some officers wanted to treat the returning fleet as heroes and welcome them back immediately. Others warned that they could no longer be trusted. To end the uncertainty, a team of doctors and scientists was allowed to board one of the ships and meet the crew face to face. The boarding party entered through an airlock and walked through quiet halls that felt strangely unfamiliar. At first everything seemed normal, but soon they noticed the details. The lights flickered in strange patterns, like a heartbeat. The walls seemed warm to the touch. And faint sounds echoed in the distance, whispers like voices carried through metal. When they finally met the crew, the doctors felt their breath catch. The men and women wore full uniforms, but every one of them kept their helmets on. They moved slowly, their steps perfectly in rhythm, as though guided by one mind. When asked to remove their helmets, none of them obeyed. Instead they stood still, silent, watching. Finally one of them spoke. "We serve," the figure said. The voice was human, but broken, distorted by something inside. The doctors asked what had happened to them. The crew member tilted his head slightly, as though struggling to remember. "We were called," he said. "We were remade. We are more now." He gave no other explanation. Medical scans were taken quickly. The results shocked the scientists. On the surface the crew seemed normal, their vital signs steady, their heartbeats human. But deeper scans showed strange patterns in the nervous system. Energy signals pulsed through their bodies, like threads of light woven into flesh. Their brains showed unusual activity, as though something else was moving alongside their thoughts. Yet none of them seemed in pain. They stood quietly, answering few questions, their voices always the same, calm and empty. When the doctors left, they felt a cold unease. These were humans, yes, but not the same humans who had left Earth so many years ago. Something had changed them. Something had touched them in the dark. Reports spread quickly through the command centers. Some leaders said the changes did not matter. The fleet had returned, and humanity needed its heroes once more. But the scientists warned of danger. "They are not fully human anymore," one of them whispered. "Something is inside them." The words sent shivers through the room. Still the fleet remained silent, orbiting Earth without aggression, waiting. They accepted no orders, gave no explanations, only repeating from time to time, "We are home." Families begged to see their loved ones, but the government refused, fearing what might happen if the truth was revealed. Protests filled the streets. People carried pictures of the vanished soldiers, demanding their return. They shouted that the fleet had saved humanity once and would save it again. They called the warnings of the scientists lies, born of fear. But in the shadows, darker rumors spread. Some officers claimed the crew did not eat or sleep. Others said their voices sometimes overlapped, many speaking as one. A technician swore that while repairing a docking cable, he saw a crew member lift a heavy crate with one hand, strength no human should have. The government tried to keep such reports hidden, but whispers traveled fast. Across Earth, fear grew quietly inside hope. Then, one night, an emergency occurred. A guard on one of the docked ships entered a medical bay and found a strange sight. A crew member was sitting on the floor, holding his helmet in his hands. His face was visible at last. His skin glowed faintly with patterns of light, lines moving across his cheeks like rivers of fire. His eyes shone with silver brightness, no longer human eyes at all. When the guard raised his weapon, the crew member only whispered, "Do not fear. We are still your children." But his voice was layered, as if more than one person spoke through him. The guard fled in terror, reporting what he had seen. By morning the story had reached Earth Command. Panic grew. If this was true, then the fleet was not simply changed. It was transformed. Something had come back wearing human skin, but carrying more than humanity inside. And still the ships waited in orbit, silent and watchful, as if they knew their time had not yet come. The world could no longer hide from the truth. The fleet had returned, but the men and women inside were not the same as before. Rumors spread faster than any official report. Some claimed the crew glowed in the dark. Others whispered they no longer breathed like humans, that their bodies moved with strange grace, as if controlled by something unseen. Earth Command tried to control the story, but secrets always escaped. Soon every street, every family, every child knew. The heroes were different now. In secret chambers deep beneath Earth's surface, interrogations began. Selected officers and scientists spoke face to face with the returned crew. They asked the same questions again and again. Where had you gone? What had changed you? What did you see? At first the answers were nothing but silence. The crew members stood motionless, their dark visors reflecting the lights. They spoke little, and when they did, their words were vague. "We were taken," one man finally admitted. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with strange certainty. "We crossed into the Black Ocean. Something called us." The scientists leaned forward, demanding details. What was this Black Ocean? Was it another galaxy? Was it a weapon of the enemy? But the man only shook his head. It was not a place, he whispered. It was a presence. A voice in the dark. It showed us what we could become. The room fell silent. The interrogators exchanged uneasy glances. The man continued, his pale hands trembling. We fought in the war. We were dying. Then the voice came. It took us into its embrace. It remade us. We are not only human now. We are more. When asked what more meant, the man gave no answer. His eyes glowed faintly beneath his visor, and he whispered, "You will understand soon." Not all crew members were willing to speak. Some sat in silence for hours, staring at the walls as if listening to something only they could hear. Others grew violent when pressed for answers, their voices rising in unison, echoing as if many throats spoke at once. Guards reported hearing whispers in the corridors at night, even when the rooms were empty. One doctor who examined a crew member in private returned pale and shaking. He refused to write his report, muttering only one sentence again and again: "They are human no longer." Meanwhile, small changes began to appear across the fleet. Engineers noticed strange glowing patterns crawling slowly along the ship's hulls, like veins of light beneath the surface. The metal seemed alive, pulsing faintly as if it had a heartbeat. Tools placed near the walls sometimes vibrated on their own. One technician swore he saw the floor shift under his feet, like liquid hardening into shape. The scientists grew desperate for answers. They dissected data, replayed recordings, scanned every inch of the returned ships. But the deeper they searched, the less they understood. It was as if the fleet had become something new, something that obeyed laws beyond human science. Among the crew, some began to show physical changes that could no longer be hidden. A young woman, once a pilot, was found in her quarters with glowing marks spreading across her arms and neck, like patterns burned into her flesh. She wept softly, telling the doctors that she could feel the stars inside her skin. Another crewman collapsed in the hall, his body twitching with strange energy. When medics tried to help, he opened his eyes and whispered in a voice that was not his own, "Do not touch me. The change is not finished." Within days, more cases appeared. Light spilled from eyes, hands, and skin. Voices overlapped as though one mouth spoke with many tongues. Still the government tried to keep the truth hidden, but too many people had seen. Panic grew among the soldiers stationed near the fleet. Some refused to guard the ships, claiming the crew watched them with glowing eyes even through solid walls. Others reported dreams of strange voices calling to them at night, voices that promised power, voices that begged them to listen. The divide in humanity grew wider. Many people still wanted to believe the fleet was heroic. They argued that whatever had changed them, the soldiers had suffered for humanity and should be honored, not feared. Others demanded the fleet be destroyed before the change spread. Protests filled the streets once more, this time louder, angrier, more desperate. Earth Command could no longer stay silent. They called an emergency meeting of world leaders, showing them evidence that the returned fleet was no longer purely human. But even in that room of power, no agreement could be reached. Fear clashed with hope. Trust fought suspicion. And above them all, orbiting silently in the dark, the fleet waited. Then came the most terrifying sign yet. In the middle of the night, without warning, one of the crew members escaped his chamber and walked calmly into the center of the docking bay. Guards surrounded him, weapons raised. But before they could act, the man lifted his hands. His skin split open with light, lines of fire racing across his body. His voice was no longer one, but many, a chorus speaking through his mouth. "We are the bridge," he declared. "We are the path to what comes next." Then he collapsed, silent, the glow fading but leaving scars across his skin like alien symbols. The guards stood frozen, unable to move. They carried him away, but the words remained, echoing through every corridor and every mind. What did he mean by bridge? What was coming next? No one had answers. But one truth had become clear: the fleet had not simply returned. It had brought something back with it, something that was slowly unfolding inside them. And whatever it was only just beginning. The world was now split in two. The return of the vanished fleet had once brought hope, but hope was giving way to fear. Every new report, every strange sight, every whisper from the transformed crew only deepened the divide among humanity. Families of the returned soldiers filled the streets, demanding the government welcome them home. They carried candles, banners, and pictures, shouting that the fleet had sacrificed everything for humanity and should be honored, not imprisoned. They wept and prayed for reunion. But others shouted just as loudly. They carried signs warning of infection, of corruption, of something alien hiding beneath human skin. They demanded the fleet be destroyed before it could bring doom to Earth. The arguments turned to riots. Friends stopped trusting friends. Cities broke into factions. The heroes had come home, but instead of uniting the people, they were tearing them apart. In the halls of Earth Command, the arguments grew louder as well. The generals insisted that the fleet was still valuable. Even if the soldiers were changed, their ships were powerful, and humanity had no greater defense against the unknown dangers of the galaxy. They spoke of strategy, of strength, of unity under discipline. "They are ours," one general shouted. "They belong to Earth. Whatever has happened to them, we can control it." But the scientists shook their heads. They showed scans of glowing marks on skin, recordings of voices echoing with multiple tones, data proving the ships were no longer built of ordinary metal. "You cannot control what you do not understand," one scientist warned. "They are not fully human. They are something else now. If we embrace them blindly, we may lose everything." The leaders argued through the night, but no agreement was reached. Outside the chambers, fear grew sharper. Soldiers stationed near the returned fleet began to refuse orders. Some deserted their posts. Others swore that the crew's whispers were crawling into their dreams, calling them by name, promising them a place among the changed. A lieutenant even confessed that he heard his dead brother's voice echoing through the walls of one of the ships. The divide spread like fire. Humanity was no longer arguing about the future. It was fighting about survival. Then came the event that changed everything. Without warning, one of the returned warships came alive. Its engines roared with blue fire. Its hull shimmered with strange glowing lines. Weapons rotated into position, targeting systems flashing across the sky. Alarm sirens screamed through Earth Command. Every defense station on Earth lit up, preparing for battle. Fighters scrambled from their hangars. Civilians looked to the skies with terror as the shadow of the warship loomed above. For long minutes, the planet held its breath. Was this the first strike of the changed fleet? Was Earth about to be destroyed by the very heroes it once loved? But the ship did not fire. It held its position, weapons glowing but silent. A signal burst across all frequencies. A voice filled every speaker, every screen, every device. It was the same voice that had haunted the returned crew, layered and echoing, human and not human at once. "Do not fear. We are not your enemy. We are the path." The message repeated again and again, until finally the ship powered down its weapons and drifted back into formation. Earth was shaken to its core. Some leaders claimed it was proof the fleet still meant no harm. They had activated weapons only to show strength, to remind Earth that they were still protectors. Others were certain it was a warning. The fleet had shown what it could do, and it had shown that Earth's defenses were powerless against it. Whispers spread through the population. Some people dropped to their knees in worship, believing the fleet was now divine, messengers of a higher power. Others called for immediate war, demanding that the fleet be destroyed before it acted again. The divide had now become a canyon. There was no middle ground left. In the midst of the chaos, small groups of scientists reported a new discovery. The signal sent by the armed ship was not just sound. Hidden inside the transmission was a pattern, a wave of energy that affected human brains. People who listened to the signal reported strange dreams, visions of stars bending, of endless black oceans, of voices calling from beyond. Some woke with glowing marks faintly visible on their skin, though doctors could not explain how. The revelation spread fear even faster. The fleet was not just changed, it was changing others. Yet despite the danger, the pull of the fleet grew stronger for many. Crowds gathered near the spaceports, begging to be taken aboard. They shouted that they wanted to be transformed too, that the fleet had found the next step of evolution. They said Earth should not fight it, but join it. Governments grew desperate. Soldiers were ordered to push back the crowds. Riots erupted again. Families turned against each other. For the first time since humanity had first reached the stars, the greatest threat was not an alien race, but humanity itself, divided and broken. And above it all, silent in orbit, the vanished fleet watched, waiting like patient predators or patient gods. No one could tell which. The question hung heavy in every heart: had the heroes returned to save humanity, or to end it? The tension across Earth grew heavier each day. The vanished fleet no longer looked like protectors. Their presence in orbit felt more like a storm waiting to break. People below argued, prayed, and fought, but high above, the ships remained silent, drifting like giants of steel and shadow. Yet silence did not mean stillness. Inside the ships, the changes continued. Doctors who studied the crew reported new signs every day. Their bodies no longer behaved as normal. Cuts healed in minutes, bones fused in ways no human medicine could explain. Their skin carried glowing patterns that shifted slowly, like constellations alive beneath the flesh. Even their voices were different now. When several crew members spoke together, their words overlapped in strange harmony, as though one mind stretched across many throats. Some officers described it as listening to a choir inside a single body. Others found it unbearable, a sound that clawed at their sanity. The scientists warned that the crew was no longer fully human, but the military still hoped to control them. Earth Command ordered another round of interviews, trying to reach the minds of their old soldiers. But the answers grew stranger. One captain, once a man of strong will, spoke with calm certainty. "We are more than what you made us," he said. "We are chosen. We see the path now." When pressed to explain what path he meant, the captain smiled faintly. His teeth shimmered as if light lived inside them. "The path beyond flesh. The path beyond fear." The words sent a chill through the room. More changes soon appeared, not only in the crew but in the ships themselves. Engineers who worked inside the hangars noticed the metal walls shifting when no one touched them. Plates that were once solid seemed to ripple like liquid, forming shapes before hardening again. Wires pulsed faintly with light as though carrying blood instead of electricity. One mechanic dropped his tool when he saw the hull bend away from his hand, as if the ship was alive and avoiding his touch. "These are not machines anymore," he whispered. "They are growing." Reports like this spread quickly, feeding the fear. Civilians were already divided, but now soldiers began to break as well. Some refused to board the ships again. Others demanded the fleet be destroyed immediately. Yet a few reacted differently. They spoke of feeling drawn to the fleet, of hearing whispers in their dreams that promised power, clarity, and eternal purpose. The divide now ran not only through the people, but through the armies meant to protect them. Then came the event that shocked everyone. A high-ranking human officer was sent aboard one of the fleet's flagships to negotiate. He was brave, respected, a man trusted to face the unknown. He entered the docking bay with a small escort and stepped into the corridors that pulsed with living light. The escort waited at the edge while the officer walked deeper, determined to meet the captain. Minutes passed. Then hours. No signal came back. When the escort tried to follow, they found the corridors shifting like a maze. Doors opened and closed on their own. Shadows moved in the corners where no humans stood. At last they returned, shaken, reporting that they could not find the officer at all. Earth Command demanded answers. The fleet gave none. The officer was never seen again. Whispers spread that the ship had swallowed him whole. Some claimed he had been absorbed, body and mind, into whatever new existence the fleet now served. His family begged for truth, but none was given. All Earth heard was silence, heavy and final. After this, Fear transformed into dread. The idea that the fleet was taking humans into itself filled the world with horror. Still, the fleet did not attack. Instead it began to speak more openly. Signals flooded Earth's channels, carrying the voices of the changed. Do not resist, the messages said. The old ways are ending. Fear is a chain. Flesh is a cage. We are free now. You can be free too. Some people collapsed in tears, hearing the voices of their long-lost loved ones among the messages. Others screamed in terror, believing the dead were being used as puppets. Governments broke under the pressure. Some leaders wanted to negotiate, to embrace the new power. Others demanded war, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the fleet itself grew stranger. Observers saw the ships reconfiguring in orbit, their shapes bending and shifting like clay under invisible hands. Long black spires stretched outward from the hulls. Lights pulsed across the surface like veins. What had once been machines of steel and fire were now something else, something alive, something becoming. On the streets of Earth, people began to form new cults, gathering in secret to pray to the fleet. They called the changed crew the Children of the Stars. They painted glowing patterns on their skin and whispered that soon all humanity would rise into the same form. In contrast, armies drilled harder, weapons aimed skyward, preparing for the war they felt was inevitable. The divide was now beyond healing. Humanity no longer knew whether to welcome its heroes or destroy them. Above, the vanished fleet remained patient, silent between its strange transmissions, as though waiting for the perfect moment. And within their living ships, something vast and unseen stirred. Whatever transformation had begun among the crew and the machines was not yet complete. It was only the beginning of something greater. The day finally came when the vanished fleet broke its silence. For weeks they had floated in orbit, their strange ships pulsing with hidden life, their crews half human and half something else. Humanity had waited in fear and confusion, unsure if these old heroes were now protectors or monsters. Then, without warning, every screen on Earth went black. Every radio, every satellite, every device carried the same image. A figure appeared, standing tall in the darkness. It was a captain from the fleet, a man whose name was once sung in stories, now unrecognizable. His eyes glowed silver, his skin traced with living light. When he spoke, his voice was no longer one voice. It was many, layered and echoing, a chorus rising from a single mouth. Do not fear. We are still yours. We are still human. But we are more. His words echoed across every city, every home. Families cried out, recognizing the faces of their loved ones among the crew that stood behind him. Yet there was no joy in their reunion, only dread, for their smiles were too still, their movements too perfect. The captain continued, his silver eyes unblinking. We were not lost. We were chosen. The void itself reached for us, and we answered. We have seen what waits beyond the stars. We have been remade, not broken. We are no longer soldiers of Earth. We are messengers. The world fell into silence. People held their breath, afraid of what would come next. The captain lifted his hand, and strange patterns of light swirled in the air behind him, shapes that twisted like galaxies seen through broken glass. The war you remember was never the true threat, he said. The enemy you fought was only the first shadow. There are greater forces moving in the dark. They watched us. They called us. They showed us the path to survival. Humanity cannot walk this path as it is. Flesh is weak. Fear is heavy. Alone, you will fall. With us, you will rise. His voice grew stronger, rising with strange rhythm, as though not only he spoke but something through him. We are not here to conquer. We are here to prepare. To make you ready for what comes. Many watching fell to their knees, believing his words. Others shouted in anger, refusing to accept that humanity's heroes had turned into prophets of something alien. In the chambers of Earth Command, leaders argued in panic. Was this truth or manipulation? Was the fleet saving humanity, or bending it toward destruction? The captain spoke again. You fear us because we are changed. But change is the only way to survive. We are the bridge. Walk with us, and you will not vanish as we did. Refuse, and when the dark comes, you will be alone. With those words, the broadcast ended. But the fleet was not finished. Moments later, every sensor on Earth detected a massive surge of energy. From the heart of the fleet, a signal burst into the galaxy, brighter and stronger than anything humanity had ever sent. It spread like fire across the stars, traveling faster than thought, a beacon reaching into the deepest void. The scientists who studied it grew pale. The pattern was complex, filled with strange harmonics and structures no human technology could create. "This is not just a signal," one of them whispered. "It is a call." Panic spread through the command centers. Who was the signal calling? What would answer? The fleet remained silent, their ships glowing softly, their crews watching with silver eyes. On Earth, the divide became chaos. Some people celebrated, believing the signal would bring allies, saviors, gods who would lift humanity into greatness. Others screamed in terror, convinced the fleet had betrayed them, inviting doom to their very doorstep. Riots erupted in the streets. Armies raised their weapons toward the sky. Yet no one could stop the signal. It had already gone too far, racing into the black between stars. Days passed in tense silence. Humanity held its breath, waiting for a reply. In those days strange dreams spread among the population. Thousands reported visions of endless oceans of stars, voices whispering promises of strength, hands reaching out of the void. Doctors could not explain how so many shared the same dreams. Some believed it was madness. Others believed it was the first touch of whatever the fleet had called. Then, one night, the answer came. Deep space stations reported a disturbance at the edge of known space. Sensors screamed as something massive moved, too far to see, too vast to measure. It was not a fleet like humanity's. It was something older, darker, stranger, approaching slowly, patiently, as though following the beacon. On Earth, fear turned to despair. The signal had been answered. Humanity's vanished fleet had not only returned, they had summoned something else. Whether that something was friend or enemy, no one could yet tell. But one truth was clear. The heroes of old were no longer soldiers of Earth. They were servants of the unknown. And they had just opened the door. The world stood at the edge of a choice it was not ready to make. The vanished fleet had returned, but they were no longer the same. They had sent a signal into the galaxy, and the galaxy had answered. Something vast was moving through the void, coming closer each day. Humanity's leaders gathered in hidden chambers, their faces pale, their voices shaking. Some said they must trust the fleet, for the old heroes still carried human blood, and perhaps their strange transformation was the only path to survival. Others shouted that the fleet had betrayed them, that they had brought doom to Earth by calling whatever lurked beyond. "If we bow to them," one leader warned, "then humanity is no longer free. We will become slaves to whatever controls them." But another voice rose, desperate and fearful. "If we fight them, we will be crushed. You saw their ships. You saw their power. We cannot win." No agreement was reached. Outside, the streets burned with anger and fear. People marched with torches, shouting for the fleet to be welcomed. Others marched with weapons, demanding the fleet be destroyed. Families split apart. Brothers turned against brothers. The divide had become a wound too deep to heal. Meanwhile, the fleet remained silent in orbit, waiting. At last, the signal came again. Every screen lit with the face of a transformed captain, his silver eyes glowing like stars. "The dark approaches," he said. "We have called, and they have heard. You cannot face them as you are. Alone, you will fall. But with us, you will rise. Choose now. Join us, or fight us." The message ended, leaving Earth in silence. The choice was clear, but impossible. To join the fleet was to abandon what it meant to be human. To fight them was to risk total destruction. Armies across the world prepared for battle. Ships fueled, weapons armed, soldiers stood ready. Yet at the same time, crowds gathered at the spaceports, begging to be taken aboard the fleet, their voices filled with desperate hope. It was as if humanity itself had split into two species, one clinging to the old ways, the other rushing toward the unknown. Then, on the third night after the message, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. Deep space stations reported movement at the edge of human territory. Something was coming closer, moving with impossible speed. At first it was only a blur on the sensors, but soon the images became clear. Massive shapes, larger than any human ship, gliding through the void with strange grace. They were not alien swarms like those fought long ago. They were something older, grander, more terrifying. Their forms shifted like shadows, bending light around them. No one could measure their size. They were too vast, too strange, as if the void itself had taken shape and begun to move. Panic spread across Earth. People screamed in the streets, staring at the night sky as if the stars themselves were falling. Leaders shouted orders, but fear drowned every command. And then, as the first of the massive shapes crossed into human space, the vanished fleet stirred. Their ships glowed brighter, spires of light crawling across their hulls. The voices of their crew filled every channel again, layered and echoing. "We told you. We are the bridge. We are the path. Follow us, or be swept away." The defense forces of Earth locked weapons on the fleet. Generals argued furiously, their fingers hovering over the command to fire. But their hands shook, for deep down they knew the truth. If they fired, war would begin not only against the fleet, but against whatever was coming. If they did nothing, humanity's fate would be tied to the unknown. In the cities, people knelt and prayed. Others armed themselves, swearing to resist to the last breath. The divide had reached its peak. Humanity was ready to destroy itself even before the darkness arrived. High above, the vanished fleet turned slowly toward the approaching shadows. Their ships pulsed with living light, as if preparing for a battle that no human could even imagine. One last message came, spoken not with words but with a sound that echoed in every mind, as though the thought itself had been placed inside human skulls. "We vanished once. If you fight us now, humanity will vanish forever." The message ended, and silence returned. In that silence, the first of the massive unknown ships emerged from the void, its shape blotting out the stars. It was larger than a continent, darker than night, and yet glowing faintly with power. Humanity's fleets prepared to fire. Earth's armies trembled. The vanished heroes, no longer human, stood ready between their home and the approaching shadow. And in that moment, the world realized its final truth. The choice was no longer only theirs. Whatever came next would decide the future of the species. The skies filled with light as the newcomers arrived, and Earth held its breath, knowing that the next moment would decide if humanity rose into something greater, or was erased forever.